All right, most people fail at Airbnb because they can't get landlords to say yes. Okay, so in this video, I'm gonna dive through in way more detail rather than on my Instagram on actually how you get landlords to say yes. Okay, this is a proven strategy that I've used to scale up my portfolio all the way up to 26 doors. I've done over 7 figures on Airbnb alone in the last 3 years. And I wanna talk about how I actually landed and scaled these units to the portfolio I have today. Okay. I want to give you guys a generic base of like this framework and this video, especially of what we're going to talk about. And it's creating a win-win situation from us and the landlord or the apartment complex that we're working with. Okay. I see too many people when they're trying to land Airbnb and they throw their pitch in, they come right off the bat as saying they're an Airbnb company. Okay, and that's a big no-no. That's not something that we want to do here. You don't want to say right off the bat that we're going to be using the property for short-term rental, we're going to be listing on Airbnb and VRBO and all of these things. You have to first discuss the business model and lay it all out for them, but also present it as a win-win because these people have problems and we got to create a solution, and we're going to dive into that here in a second. So first things first is what I like to do, I'm going to discuss a little bit of like how I get to the pitch, and then I'll dive into it. Is first things first, when I'm looking for properties, what I'm doing is Zillow, Craigslist, all of these for rent websites for owner, and I'm calling them and I'm asking them if they allow corporate leases. Now, I'll explain why it's important here in a bit, but the real reason right now is we're not putting our name on the leases. Okay, we're putting our LLC, our business name on these leases. So first things first, I ask if they allow corporate leases because that's usually a telling tale if they're going to allow us to do that in the first place, which is putting our business name on the lease, not our personal name. Okay, then if I do get that approval from them, that's a first green light. Then what I do on that call is I schedule an in-person tour. A lot of people like to pitch over the phone, whether it's an apartment complex or a landlord, and you can absolutely do it. But I've seen way more success rate when you go in person and tour the unit in person and like meet them face to face. Think of it this way: when you guys are creating deals and you guys are creating relationships, partnerships, whatever it is, you like to meet them face to face. You like to shake their hand, you like to feel them out, see how they are as a person, and all of these things. Like that plays a massive role. And if they're going to give you that yes, so I steer all my clients. For myself, I pitched all my deals in person. And that's how I've developed good relationships with my landlords and apartment complexes that I work with today. Now, once you schedule that tour, something that I do want to keep in mind for you guys, it's like something I like to keep on track with all my clients, especially when they're going on their first few tours. It's a little bit nervous, they get a little bit nervous rather. It's totally fine, but you have to keep a framework as not a salesperson. You're not going there to sell them on something. You're going there just to explain the business model of what you do, okay? Now, going back to my point of where I said a lot of people come right off the bat of saying they're an Airbnb company, they're going to list the property on short-term rentals. You don't want to do that. You want to stay far away from that as possible. And that's why a lot of people get shut down immediately and they get no luck landing any deals. So when you're touring in person, you want to just explain the business model like I said. So a quick script that I give you that I've used tons and tons of time over and over again is instead of an Airbnb company, I say we're a corporate housing company. Now, for you guys that don't understand or know what a corporate housing company is, they've been around for a long, long time. What we do is a little bit different. So I'm going to explain to you the difference of the two before we continue in the pitch. So a corporate housing company, traditional one, was essentially, let's use an example of the Verizon company, right? Let's say they have an employee that's traveling to a different state for a 2-week-long project. What that company would typically do is they'd reach out to apartment complexes or landlords, houses for rent, and they ask if they allow corporate leases. And what they do is the company will put their business name on the lease and they will put their employee to stay there for a few weeks so they don't have to bind down and sign a 6-month lease or a year-long lease when that employee is just going to the area for a short amount of time. So that's a traditional corporate housing company. That's why when I first call, I ask if they allow corporate leases because I know if they do, that's a go-ahead. Okay, we can put our business name on this lease. Now, back to the pitch. The corporate housing company that we're presenting is a little bit different. And then I put this in my pitch as well. So let's continue. So when I'm touring the property, I'm obviously checking if everything's good. You want to make sure the property is, turnkey ready. There's no issues with appliances, all that good stuff. That's a discussion for a later video. But when I'm touring the property, I'm just explaining the business model. I'm super confident. Even if you guys are a startup, you can tell them that, right? Everyone has to start somewhere, right? No matter if they're a multi-billion-dollar company today, like Airbnb, like they started somewhere, right? They were a startup at one point. It's totally fine. And especially if you guys are hungry and you're a driven entrepreneur that is not going to take no for an answer, they're going to see that. And a good businessman, a good businesswoman, a landlord, a property manager is going to see the drive that you have and the confidence that you have behind your words. And that's going to give them more of a reason to say yes to you. So that's very important as well. So keep that in mind. So a traditional pitch would look like this. Yeah, so we're a corporate housing company. We're looking to pick up a few units in the area. And, we saw that this property was available and it's great for what we're looking for. We're also seeing a large influx of corporate professionals traveling here, and that's the exact type of clientele that we serve. And what we do is we're like a traditional corporate housing company, but what we do is we find the properties first, sign them with our business name on the lease, and we typically sign a 1 to 3 year long lease. And then what we do is we market the property out through short-term rental websites, and we place corporate professionals in the property, right? Travel nurses, doctors, lawyers. And the reason we do this is we see a ton of travel nurses that come into the area and they don't want to lock themselves down in a 6-month lease or even a 3-month lease when they're only in the area for 4 weeks or 3 weeks. So what we do is we put our name on the lease and we sign a long-term lease with you guys, and then we worry about occupying the property. Now, we're going to guarantee rent every single month, and we're going to be able to manage this entire property for you, so you don't have to have a property manager. So that's a good plus for you guys as well, a little tip if you guys are working with landlords. And the whole reason here is I'm going to talk about finding a problem and solving it, okay? That's what this is really going to boil into. So back to the pitch. Now, you could also throw in there, we work with insurance groups, we displace families, whether they're in house fires, house floods, and typically they come to us and they ask if we have any properties available, and we place them in our property. Now, what we're doing here is we're telling them that we're similar to a traditional corporate housing company, but we're not exactly like that. Instead, we sign the lease beforehand, and then we go ahead and market the property out. Now, you're gonna get a ton of objections, and that's for another video. Objection handling is huge. They're gonna ask you, are you gonna list the property on Airbnb? What's gonna happen for screening, background checks, all this stuff? That's for another video that I'm happy to dive into with you guys. If you wanna hear about that, comment word below objection. I'll make a video on that as well. But we're really just explaining the business model here, and I wanna give you a framework pitch that you guys can tailor, throw your own words in there, and that's gonna explain the business model as a win-win for them. So let's dive into this next. Creating that win-win situation, which is what this boils down to, guys. You have to realize the problems and goals that these landlords and apartment complex owners have, okay? The issue is with landlords, when they're buying properties, their main goal is to scale that portfolio, right? Own tens and hundreds of properties to create this long-term generational wealth. But the problem that they have is every time they buy a property, they have to find a quality tenant that's gonna occupy that property and sign a year-long lease with that landlord so they can have that consistent monthly rent paid to them that's gonna cover a mortgage. Once that's taken care of, then they can focus on buying another property. But when someone like us comes into play and says, hey, we'll be your long-term tenant, we're gonna sign the lease in our company name and we'll pay you consistent rent month after month, you can go ahead and continue buying more properties. On top of that, we're gonna manage this entire thing, okay? Another tip I will give you guys is like, a lot of people are like, well, are people gonna damage the property or is the place gonna be a mess? They're gonna damage my carpets, the walls. This is a really good objection handling example that I wanna tell you guys real quick before I get off track is, well, think of it like this. A lot of long-term tenants that are renting, they rarely clean their place, okay? Like the place is usually a mess, especially like lower income tenants. They'll clean the place maybe once a month, once every few months. And when you put it in perspective of this and say, well, we're gonna have our professional cleaning team clean this multiple times a month, the place is gonna be in pristine condition, better than it would be if you rented to a tenant, because that's gonna allow us to have a better operating business when people are coming in, checking into the property, and that it's clean, right? So the property is gonna get cleaned way more. We're gonna have a professional cleaning team on site, and we're gonna have a handyman also that I'll discuss in another video. That's more systems and teams for later on, that is gonna take care of all the management here, so you don't even have to pay a property manager. So now I'm giving so much value to these landlords in these apartment complexes where they're like, oh wow, now I can really just continue buying properties. I don't have to find tenants every time I buy a new house or apartment and have to find someone that I can trust and run a background check and make sure they're a credible tenant and they're not going to destroy my place. That's where we come into play. So when you present it as a win-win to them, it's massive, right? Like I said before, anyone that is a smart businessman, smart businesswoman, they're going to see it as a win-win opportunity. And to be frank with you guys, if someone like is giving you a hard time and you're pitching to them, they're kind of like that hovering mom example, like you don't want to work with them anyway. Like there's tons of deals out there. There's tons of great landlords and great apartment complexes to work with. As long as you present the business model correctly, they're going to see it as a win-win and they're going to see you as an asset. Okay. Now, another pro to this is when you're working with apartment complexes, let's say the entire apartment complex has 200 units, right? And let's say 150 of those units are rented out every year, but 50 of them are vacant. Well, that's 50 units, 50 different units of rent that they're missing out yearly. When you build this long-term relationship with them, that's a possibility for you to take all those units eventually. Now you're making them extra money, right? Every apartment complex has vacancies. Like very rare is there an apartment complex that is 100% occupied 100% time of the year. Like it's very rare. Obviously it's possible, but majority of the time they will have vacancies, and that's where we come into play. Again, we're finding a problem and fixing it for them. We're finding a solution. Okay, so this is the biggest thing. And the real thing is here is, like I told you guys in the beginning of this video, is creating that win-win situation, bringing value to the table. And when you present it to them, I'm telling you, you guys are going to have way more success. You're going to get a bunch more yeses, and that's what's going to allow you to scale your portfolio way faster. And the real problem here is people don't do that, right? They try to just present the business model and say, hey, I'm going to put this on Airbnb. Well, yeah, that's the case, but like you can't just come off the bat and say that, right? So I hope this helps for you guys. If you guys want to hear more about this, maybe more in-depth detail and like maybe some other pitches or whatever it is, I'm happy to do that. Comment the word pitch below. Comment what else you guys want to hear about next. I'm going to be dropping videos like this daily, weekly, on all different aspects of the business, systems and teams, like I said, lease addendums, all that stuff. One thing I will also mention here as well, I don't know if I mentioned it before, I just want to make sure I have it in here. Traditionally, you guys are going to be signing a traditional lease, okay? A lease that any normal tenant will sign. Now, we have something called a lease addendum. This is a lease addendum that I've had typed up by a lawyer of mine a few years back. I paid a lot of money for it. I give it to all my clients now. They use the exact same lease addendum. What this is when you sign a traditional lease with a landlord or an apartment complex, there's going to be clauses in there that are going to say, you know, you can't sublet it out. You can't list on Airbnb, short-term rental websites, or you can't change the locks. Like all of these things go against our business model, okay? We can operate around them, but we want to make sure there's no strain in the business model. So what I do is I present them my lease addendum. I'll sign their traditional lease and I present the lease addendum and I have them sign that. In that lease addendum, there's clauses saying I could back out if regulations change with short-term rentals. We're allowed to change the locks. We're allowed to market the place out on short-term rental websites. All of these things are involved and they will virtually bind with the lease addendum you signed from the landlord, and then the lease addendum will virtually bind, like I said. So I wanted to throw that in there as well. That's extremely important. That's like the legality stuff behind this. Again, something we could discuss on another video, but I hope this helps. I want to dive further into detail on this pitch and how to get more yeses from landlords. And I hope you guys appreciate it. So if you want to see more of this, comment the word pitch below, comment some other stuff that you want to hear on, and really how I've scaled my portfolio and made over 7 figures in the last 3 years on Airbnb alone. So hope this helps. Talk to you guys later. Peace.